Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, the major motion podcast from the San Francisco Bay Area. You don't need to say my name 3 times for me to show up. I'm John Negroni. And from the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, he is a Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania critic. It's Will Ashton.
Oddly location-specific intro, I have to admit, but not a false one. Hi, John.
You know, Will Ashton, there is nothing undead about your takes. They're as live as can be. And can I say this is a big Cinemaholics first? Do you know why?
Because you're recording in a movie theater right now?
I'm recording from a movie theater, that's right. Live from the AMC Kabuki 8. We'll see if they kick me out. But yes, we're doing this from movie theater for the first time. Might as well.
You should get the ushers to come in and say their opinions on the films. Sure. Get the projectionist, the concessionist, all of them. The random people in the lobby.
I agree. I got some popcorn right now. Just kind of munching, having a good time. But all right, so we are going to talk about Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, which, well, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, the sequel to, you guessed it, Beetlejuice, is making a ton of money at the box office. Did you think this coming?
I did. I mean, it just seemed, and we'll talk about this more as far as the long history of this film coming to be, but it just seemed like this was sort of inevitable. Like, there are always people kind of clamoring for it. Like, if you spent any time on Facebook in 2014, for instance, you'd see a ton of fake mock-up posters for Beetlejuice 2. And they're like, it's finally happening. It would be some really poorly photoshopped photo of Michael Keaton, you know? And yeah, I guess for some reason, people have not for some reason. I get why people are excited about this, but it was just one of those things where it's I watched that first movie and I'm a huge Tim Burton fan, and we'll talk about that more. I'm sure we have already talked about it, but I love Tim Burton's movies. I like most of them at the very least. I never felt that compelled to see Beetlejuice again. Not that I was dreading this movie in any sense, outside of just worrying that it was going to be bad. But I just felt if we have to do it, we have to do it. And I feel Tim Burton was always kind of dragging his feet because he's I don't know if I can do that again. That was my second movie. It's kind of hard to recapture that magic. Not only him, but several other filmmakers and studios have tried to recapture. It's kind of the same with Ghostbusters, where it's it's a well that's understandably one they want to tap into again, but it's just hard to just find that magic again. So, yeah, to answer your question, I'm not surprised it's happening. I just kind of accept it as a fact of life. I'm just glad it's actually Tim Burton doing it and not some random journeyman director. And I feel there are so many terrible versions of Beetlejuice we could have gotten over the years. And so I think that might color my opinion in some respects. But as of now, I am begrudgingly, but still excitedly anticipating this movie, I suppose.
Will, I gotta say, your optimism is noted, because I rewatched that first movie. I think you did too. And I rewatched it right before checking out the sequel. So I think it was the day before. And Beetlejuice is not a movie that I really grew up watching a lot. And if there's one thing this sequel has taught me, just sort of engaging with some of the reactions to the sequel, at least, I'm not alone. There are a lot of other folks around our age, the millennial generation at large, who didn't really watch this movie that much growing up. Apparently it was more of a Gen X thing and above. And as far as I can tell, Gen Z is not necessarily in tune with this movie, I guess, until now, if that. But I'm kind of just looking around at how this movie is doing, and I'm still surprised. You say you're not surprised, I'm still surprised, because I rewatched that first movie and it's nice and all. It's a fun movie, but I just don't get it. I don't think I understand what it is about this movie that has people in a chokehold. Maybe you can explain to me, because I'm it's not that funny. I don't think the sequel is very funny either, which I guess we'll talk about. I guess the Beetlejuice character it's a shtick, all right, but I don't know. I don't really see what the fuss is about. Am I missing something? Sounds like I am.
I guess so. I do think that first movie is very funny. And I say as someone who's like, I know a lot of people put this in like their top 5 Burton movies. I don't know if I'm that high on it. I feel like it's in like my top 10. Probably. I'd have to do a definitive ranking because there are so many Tim Burton movies I really love, and I think this one might just kind of get beaten out because of that, but it is in some respects a quintessential Tim Burton movie, at least for like early Tim Burton films, because, you know, like his debut was Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which, yeah, I mean, you watch that movie and it's unmistakably Tim Burton, but this is a movie that I think announced Tim Burton for a lot of people. And it's just like, when they think back to Tim Burton, and maybe that's kind of colored their perception of his other movies in the sense of like, they just expect this thing again, to the point where even he, I feel like, has kind of tried to redo this in some respects, not counting this movie, but just in general. And it's just kind of hard to recapture that magic, as I was noting before. So yeah, I mean, I do think it is really, you know, it's not a film that I feel like is like the quintessential Tim Burton film as far as quality for me, but I think it is a quintessential, like, this is Tim Burton announcing himself. This is the guy that people know him as in pop culture. And this is what I think a lot of people have been wanting to see again from Tim Burton, if not directly, just like him kind of tapping into this well, going back to like the practical effects in stop motion and like doing these sort of kitschy, weird, goofy characters and being more overtly comedic and not kind of, you know, more the melodramatic side that we see in a lot of the 2000 and 2010 Tim Burton movies. And I think, you know, I think you're just kind of in the minority on your perception on the first Beetlejuice, because I think it's a lot of fun and Keaton's performance is pretty undeniable, especially considering that, like, you watch that first movie and it is, you know, kind of surprising how much he's not in the movie considering it's called Beetlejuice. But, you know, it is like his presence is just so big and so prominent and so withstanding that, I mean, it is a classic character in a classic movie for a number of reasons, but I think his performance is pretty undeniable. And so, you know, those movies coming, I think kind of indirectly, even though like a lot of these legacy sequels or whatever they are coming late, this is at least understandable as far as like it's capitalizing on Keaton's back, you know, following the wave of Birdman and Winona Ryder's coming off of Stranger Things. And, you know, you got Jenna Ortega, who did Wednesday, is now like this big deal. And a lot of people see her as kind of like the next Winona Ryder for Tim Burton, is kind of muse for him. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it makes total sense why this happened in this way.
The movie's made $264 million worldwide so far off of a $100 million budget. It's been topping the box office. And look, that's not the biggest box office in the world or anything, but I think there were some folks who were maybe a little bit hesitant to say that this was going to be successful. And I mean, just kind of reacting to what you're saying here. I just genuinely, I'm trying to understand, but like the way you explain it, I'm like, I don't know. To me, it's just like, it's popular because it's popular is what it sounds like to me. I mean, movie, okay, look, the first movie is fun. I think it's amusing. I think that movie belongs to the Maitlands. And you're right, Beetlejuice is barely in it, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that he's used sparingly, but to the film's like benefit. And it's kind of similar with the sequel too. He's not in every scene, which is good because you want to kind of preserve the weight of the character. Like that's kind of, I guess, what is fun about the first one is like, man, when is this Beetlejuice guy going to show up? He keeps getting brought up and everything. So I guess to me, it's just like, that first movie is kind of this like whimsical, kind of dark comedy. It's got its moments. I don't begrudge that people like it. I think that, yeah, sure, I like it. I think it's a good movie. It's, you know, but the fact that it's like this kind of like culturally resonant, everybody is just like so familiar with it that it just caught fire and that it's like, I don't know, that it's lasting the test of time. That's the thing that I don't get. Like, is it just because the Beetlejuice character talks loud and says goofy things? Is that it?
I think you're being a little intentionally dismissive right now. I think that is such a clever, fun, inventive script. I think it is capitalizing on a number of stars being kind of at the height of their powers as far as comedic heavyweights. You know, it's Tim Burton becoming even more emboldened with his style and really kind of having fun, still having that youthful devil may care kind of attitude in his filmmaking. Yeah, I don't know. I don't see why this is really a mystery for you I think you're maybe being deliberately a little obtuse at the moment.
I'm not, come on now. I'm not being deliberately obtuse. I'm generally trying to figure it out. And I think if there's one thing I can say that's nice, because, apparently I need to cross some boxes here. I do appreciate, at least with that first movie, that Burton took the script and kind of was like, took the initial premise, right? Of like, the inverse of a ghost story. And the Beetlejuice character was really only supposed to be kind of just like the side guy character, barely is relevant to the plot. And he kind of found in the movie a way to be like, this is the title. And also this is the thing that's like going to build up, the excitement for people to be like, oh, I want to see this character on screen. And that was obviously a very smart move. It certainly paid off. But I guess that, that's all to say. I went into the sequel with very basic expectations, hoping it would be good. And, I guess to me, it's just like, all right, well, it's been 30 years or whatever, or more than 30 years, 32 years.
Yeah.
More than that, 36 years.
Has it been 36 years?
I have this sort of like, is that it? Kind of reaction to it. Like that's it. All right. That's fine. Okay.
That's your reaction to the film at large?
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. What was the point? Like, I don't know. Is this movie just funny, but my sense of humor is on the fritz?
Well, I mean, I think going into it for Tim Burton, it probably was more of a capitalistic endeavor. It seemed like, even though I'm kinder to a lot of the more recent Burton films, give or take some exceptions, like I'm not a big fan of Dark Shadows and Planet of the Apes. I don't even know if that's late period at this point. That's probably more mid period, but like there are some things that he's done. Obviously, Alice in Wonderland is probably the nadir of his career. But, it's apparent that throughout the last few years, even though I'm soft on Dumbo and Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, it does kind of feel like he's going through the motions a little bit, or maybe even lost and kind of like, okay, I know what I want to do with these properties stylistically, but it doesn't seem like maybe he's like fully invested in an emotional sense. He's just kind of doing what's expected of him in the sense. Like, it's like, okay, now it's time for me to do like my young adult franchise. Okay, now it's time for me to do my Disney thing again. And it does seem like, probably going into this movie, like we were saying, like it's been proposed probably ever since that first Beetlejuice movie came out. That's like, oh, we got to do a sequel. We got to do a sequel. I think back to like An Evening with Kevin Smith, where he talks about how he was offered to do rewrites for, Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian. And, he has like that throwaway line of just like, didn't we say everything we needed to say with the first Beetlejuice movie? Must we go tropical? It's like the sort of thing where it's like kind of been hanging over Tim Burton as like, okay, at some point you're probably going to need to do this, whether it's when you're out or, like you fumble too much or you do like another like Planet of the Apes level disaster. It's just like kind of this thing that's expected of him. And I'm sure there was something maybe kind of begrudging about him picking this assignment up. But I think you see him in interviews and you watch this movie, and it seems like, for most directors, returning to do a 30-something year sequel to property would be like them really kind of hamming and like, just kind of winging it and going, just through the motions in a way that would feel kind of distressing and dour and not emotionally invested. But for Tim Burton, it feels like the opposite in this sense. And not that he's like back to 100% and like Burton in his prime again, but it does seem like he is reinvigorated in a way that he hasn't really been for probably 5 or so years. It does, maybe even close to 10 at this point. It does seem like, he is trying to scale down the budget. He's trying to do more practical and in-camera effects and like stop motion instead of doing CG. I think that's what's so kind of comforting about this movie, is that it does seem like by trying to recreate the aesthetic of that original movie, he is trying to kind of go back to his roots a little bit. And while I think there are a lot of problems with this movie, particularly as it relates to the script, I do think it does feel like a jolt for Burton fans. It feels like, okay, he may not be back to like the Burton we know and love, but it does feel like we're getting the Burton back. Like he's kind of getting his engine charged up, and he has these fun ideas for what we should do. And for as messy as the final end product can be, I don't know. I just feel like it's such an entertaining film that I don't know. I found this to be more enjoyable and engaging than a lot of the movies in terms of the blockbusters I saw this summer. And that's not to say that it's better than them, but it just felt like this is, if we're going to do a 30-year later sequel, I'd rather it be something like this than sort of the other kind of more, lofty, heavy in their presentation. I can't think of another one besides Ghostbusters at this point, but I just think of like Ghostbusters Afterlife and how seriously it takes itself and how much it tries to avoid the comedy of the property. And this is just tapping into like what people like about it. And, for whatever missteps it has, it does feel like a return to form for Burton, at least in some respect. And yeah, I don't know. I think it makes sense why this is proving to be one of the biggest financial hits of his career.
Well, I think I'm with you at least in terms of this being much better than Ghostbusters Afterlife. That is, I think, indisputable for me, especially compared to a lot of legacy sequels we get. I guess it's not that I have some kind of big issue with the movie. I think, again, I'm just struggling to understand. To me, it just seems like a disproportionate response. It just seems like people are like giddy about this. And I guess it's just something where I'm like, I wonder why. I don't know. But in terms of how the movie kind of plays out, you did mention, it's like 30 years later. It is doing the legacy sequel thing. And so we do have a lot of the returning cast. We have Winona Ryder back. And I would say that first Beetlejuice movie, she's fantastic in it. I mean, she's obviously one of the real standouts there because her character is just so, I think, important to the heart and soul of the movie and kind of connecting the characters and really getting the plot going. But Catherine O'Hara comes back as well. So there is Jeffrey Jones, who was in the first movie, and the less said about him, the better. This movie finds, I guess, some bizarre ways to incorporate him without showing him because I don't know, he's in jail for very bad crimes.
I actually don't think he is in jail, but he is persona non grata for very understandable reasons. If you don't know those reasons, you can go to his Wikipedia page, I suppose, and find out some heartbreaking things. But yeah, no, I thought the way they worked around the Jeffrey Jones thing was actually pretty amusing, especially the more they really commit to it. I don't know. I was chuckling along with that.
Yeah, and you're right. For some reason, I thought he was still in jail, but unfortunately, that is not the case. Actually, I don't know if he ever went to jail, which is kind of ridiculous. He was in some stuff since all that. So
yeah, he was like in the Deadwood movie. I think that was like the last thing he did, which was
that was only a few years ago.
Right.
So, wow.
Yeah, he's been doing like community theater and stuff, I think. But yeah, he's understandably not getting a lot of calls for movies these days.
Well, we do have, as you mentioned, and yes, Michael Keaton, of course, is back as Beetlejuice. Kind of slips it back into the role a bit seamlessly. I think the nature of the character lends a lot to that. It's, even if you watch the movies back to back like I did, it's not super noticeable, especially considering how much time has passed. Because he's a ghost, he's not supposed to be able to age, right? The Maitlands, so Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis, they're not in this at all. They kind of get hand waved away. And I'm a little sad about it because I thought they were really crucial to the first movie, but that's fine. I feel like you could do a successful sequel without them, and I think it's too difficult to try to include them, considering like you'd have to do de-aging and stuff, and
probably
that's a little bit too complicated.
I mean, truthfully, I feel like whenever I imagine a Beetlejuice sequel, it wouldn't really have anyone returning besides Beetlejuice, like, in the way that like Knives Out, like
yes,
I would think
exactly. Yeah. Yes. No. Okay. That is my big thing. Cause the more I thought about this, the more I'm like, they should have just done a new Beetlejuice movie that doesn't have anybody else back except for him. Cause then you can focus on other stuff. Cause it seems like that's what they wanted to do with the Monica Bellucci character. But then you just get so bogged down with like the Jenna Ortega stuff, and she and her mom ain't getting along. And just like a lot of this humdrum that I didn't really find at all engaging because so there's like a plot twist with the Jenna Ortega character. You can tell me if I'm fussing, but like, it's way too obvious. And I gotta say, like, I genuinely was a little bit like, wait, can they just pick a lane for this movie? Because I feel like it was going in every direction except for a good one.
I mean, I feel like one of the bigger issues with this movie, and again, I think this kind of ties back to it being a wobbly script. I don't know if it's, too many ideas kind of might, the script, or if it was like a writer's strike thing, or maybe a little bit of both. But this movie is like 70% first act. Like it's a lot of setup, and then like a very quick kind of resolution for like the 500 storylines it sets up throughout the movie. But yeah, I mean, I do think as far as like the Jenna Ortega and Winona Ryder and Catherine O'Hara stuff, for one, I don't know if it's deliberate or not, but it does kind of feel like a send up on like the Halloween 2018 setup. Like, like 3 generations of women are trying to, take down this sort of abusive figure from their past.
But somehow worse.
Right. I don't know if that's deliberate or if that's just kind of a coincidence, but in any case, I do think, like I was saying before, I think the fact that Stranger Things and Schitt's Creek have kind of kept Catherine O'Hara and Winona Ryder justifiably, in the limelight, it was going to make it near impossible, I think, for Warner Brothers to want to do this unless they could get them back, because they are very viable as far as not only, people being interested in this movie, but also, like being stars at this point, like they have a renewed sense of interest about them, like people who grew up with their films, I feel this nostalgia factor, but also there's like a new generation of at least TV fans who, feel like they're kind of connecting with their parents by, getting interested in this new Beetlejuice movie or what have you. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, it does kind of feel like it is at its most weighed down when it is trying to focus too much on the Winona Ryder, Jenna Ortega stuff. It does kind of take away from a lot of the comedy. It does feel fairly obvious. It does kind of feel like we need to kind of like get past that setup in order to get to the really fun stuff. So I can see where you're coming from in the sense of like, it does feel like that's a little dragged out. It does kind of feel like it does overstay its welcome as far as the execution building of it. But I took no fault with like their performance or their characters or anything.
Yeah, I guess for me, it just comes down to, I feel like they were a little bit, it took this long to do this script. I think that it doesn't come across to me like they really spent a lot of time really just like thinking out and brainstorming where these characters could be 30 years later. It feels like first drafty. Like,
I think it's the exact opposite.
Now? She has a paranormal ghost TV show. Like it's boring. It's just kind of like lowest common denominator stuff of like, I don't know. It doesn't really come across as that interesting or that kind of like, oh, okay. Yeah. That's an interesting way to go about it.
Well, I mean, that's obviously, Lydia is the like Burton surrogate in this. I mean, maybe she was also the Burton surrogate in some respects in the first movie too, but like, I think there is supposed to be a direct parallel with like her kind of going through the motions and doing this sort of tacky TV show is representative of Burton kind of going to do these like Disney movies and these other kind of family oriented films that, he's just kind of going through the motions and doing the thing. So I think that's an interesting angle for Lydia. I don't think it's like the most original idea to be sure, but I can see why Burton wanted to pursue that.
Yeah, no, sorry, I don't buy it. I think it's not that the idea of like what the character could be up to is wrong. It just does not quite, I think, come together in a way that I'm like this. I'm struggling with a little bit with it because it's not like the first movie was all that compelling, but at least the first movie had kind of an imaginative hook to it, of like, what if the ghosts were the protagonists and they're just trying to figure this all out,
Well,
that's an allegory connecting to Tim Burton, who is like a filmmaker trying to figure this stuff out, and he's a bit
sure. Yeah, I mean, it's the inverse of a haunted house film. Instead of the ghosts being the bad guys, they're the ones they're trying to get the humans out. It's a clever concept. And yeah, I mean, it ties back to like Burton always feeling like the outsider, feeling like he can't quite connect with others. But yeah, then you have Winona Ryder, still feeling like she's tethered to that identity. But, like now she's in the mainstream and people know her and they expect something from her because of this first movie. And I don't know. I mean, I think
with it,
yeah,
there's nothing really in the movie about her selling out. It's just kind of her being like, my daughter doesn't like me, and I'm weirdly submissive to this obvious creep played by Justin Theroux.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is fairly superficial in that regard. I do think it is, the thing with this movie is that it is a lot of concept over, storylines. It does feel like it's not that it's first draft to me. It just kind of feels like they have so many ideas, whether it's Burton or the studio or everybody, that I feel like they need to kind of coalesce and be like, okay, let's pick like 3 of these and then run with them. But they had like 20 on the board and they're like, we can work with all these, to the detriment, I think.
It happens with first drafts, right? Is it you have too many things going on, or
sure,
a little bit of like, let's throw some stuff at the wall and see what sticks, but then you forget to pay attention to what sticks.
I guess so. I feel like it's less first draft and more first pitch meeting, but I feel like that's kind of worse. So yeah, I get what you're saying, to your credit.
Well, what's like one of the storylines that you would have gone with, where you feel like that's the zone, like that's where they really should have honed in on or focused on the most?
Well, I really enjoy the Monica Bellucci subplot because that does directly tie to the first movie. Like you see that first movie and he has like the finger with the wedding ring on it. And it's like, oh, she didn't mean anything to me, baby. Like that. And like
the Latin flashback is easily my favorite part of the whole
Italy, but yes.
No, he's speaking in Latin.
I think they're speaking Italian, aren't they?
Well, he says it's Latin. It's a dead language. It's bubonic plague.
Yeah, you're probably right. You know more about linguistics than I do, so I'll take your word for it.
Hey, don't hype me up. I could be dead wrong, but I'm just saying that's how I came across it.
Sure. But no, I thought that whole like flashback thing, and I was worried about like having a flashback for Beetlejuice because, like in my mind, I'm like, less said the better about Beetlejuice. Like he has like this weird kind of like Southern affectation that slips in and out that like kind of makes him more inexplicable. And like, his voice is always changing. His mannerisms are always changing.
This is a pop culture spun.
Sure.
He has that line in the first movie about the exorcist. So like you can put anything you want into him.
Yeah. I mean, I do think there is something kind of funny about him somehow being aware of like cultural touchstones like O.J. Simpson and like MacArthur Park and things that are like happening, in the real world, but like only like a few. I don't know if it's more like he just kind of picks and chooses which ones interest him or if it's just kind of like his connection only picks up a handful of things. But either way,
this is a low information voter.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I don't want to bring politics into this, but sure, if you want to go that route.
I don't want to bring politics. I don't want to question Beetlejuice's political affiliation.
Right. I think he is firmly an undecided voter.
No, I think he's for RFK because he's like, well, I would eat
sure. Yeah, he's like an independent, one of those like weird libertarian types, I guess. He's like, why do we need to have seatbelts? But in any case,
now the afterlife in this one, which is something I was hoping for.
Yeah, I really enjoy seeing all the different like spiritual cadavers and like all these really funny, inventive ways and like morbidly funny, morose ways that people have died and that they're, intrinsically tethered to for their afterlife. I mean, obviously that was something in the first movie as well, but it seems like they have even more ideas with that. I mean, Jeffrey Jones's character's plight in the afterworld is really funny to me. And just what they do with that character design is really fun, especially with it being a lot of practical effects for that. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed that. I do enjoy Beetlejuice being tied to the plot, but not, like you said, like overly connected to the point where he's like the main character, even though Michael Keaton's like top billed and all that. Like, I think the movie has obviously more Beetlejuice in it, but it doesn't feel like he's like still the main character. It's very much like Winona Ryder's film. Let's see, what else is there? I do like the Willem Dafoe stuff. I don't know if that's really necessary to the film. You don't like that at all?
I don't think it works.
I liked it.
To me, it was very cringy dialogue and it was missing something. I also found the makeup effect on him to be kind of underwhelming. Maybe it's because I'm still hot off of what he was able to do with Poor Things. But yeah, no, it didn't quite. I like the basic level of the concept where he's like this hard boiled, police detective straight out of like the 50s. And he's using that to be like a real detective in the afterlife. It's a good idea. And I don't think Dafoe is doing anything wrong, but his character just kind of whiffs for me for some reason. I think something about the execution of it.
Yeah. I mean, I do think he's the character and subplot of all these that suffers the most as far as like, there are just too many things we have to focus on. He's the one that often has to kind of take the back seat because he's not really connected to any of the main characters in a direct sort of way. So I don't know. I still had enough fun with him as far as his performance and the design and the character to, excuse the fact that it doesn't really need to be in this film. I will say, I don't know if I loved Justin Theroux's character. I think that was another one of those things where it's like, I think on paper that character makes sense. I don't think the performance is quite keyed in right. And it's not that Justin Theroux is giving a bad performance. It just feels a little off to me. Like it's a little too.
I think it's an example of like he watched the first one too many times.
Maybe
trying to like mold a character that would exist in that world.
Yeah, I don't know. It just feels like maybe it's like 15% too high. Like I think you need to like tone it down a little bit. It just felt like it was a little too, I don't want to say like manic, but like a little too self-aware, I think, for its own good.
There you go. Normally I would read some comments, but I mean, I see, I'm in a movie theater. There are people walking out a movie right now. They just watched Beetlejuice. Let's go right over to them. Here's some Getty. He's dressed in a white and black suit. Okay. Excuse me, sir. Did you just watch Beetlejuice? Yeah, kid. I watched it 167 times. Oh, it's still funny. The last time I watched it. Wow. I couldn't help but notice that after Will and I said Beetlejuice 3 times, you kind of showed up right in front of this movie theater, kind of doing all kinds of weird stuff. Is there any connection to that? Well, let me ask you a question, Will Ashton.
Hey.
No, I'm John. Will's the one on the computer. Here, come over here.
Hello.
Hey, is this thing on?
Hello. Hey, Beetlejuice.
Fuck you.
Oh, wow. I do respect that you always get one. He's very good with the F-bombs, so I thought that was very clever. I was a little disappointed that one of his F-bombs was bleeped out in this movie, but given that he says it like 2 or 3 times, I understand that was probably the one that needed to be bleeped. But, it was nice talking to you, Beetlejuice.
Sorry, Will, he walked away right after he cussed you out. And I gotta say, his impression of Beetlejuice wasn't very good. It sounded kind of hapdash and low effort, honestly.
Yeah, I didn't even realize it was Beetlejuice until you mentioned it was Beetlejuice, so.
Right.
He must be having an off day.
Must be. Well, he did just watch that movie. So, okay. We do have some other folks who watched the movie. Here's what they had to say. Azel said, "This was a mess, but an immensely enjoyable mess. The 3 major story beats never felt resolved at the end, but hot dang, I laughed a lot on the way there. Visually, it felt like a return to form for Burton, a form he hasn't had in more than a decade. Keaton is heckin' great, and I left the cinema wanting more of him." Well, Will, you know what? I think that is a mission accomplished if you're leaving the theater wanting more of the Beetlejuice character, because I think that's kind of the point. That's kind of how you're supposed to walk out of the first one, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, he is such a big character that less is more with him. I think it would have been too exhausting if he was like in 80% of the film. And I think Keaton was aware of that. I think that was one of his stipulations when he made the film. Maybe it was one of Burton's stipulations. I forget which, that Beetlejuice wasn't the main character, but still like a supporting character. And yeah, I think that was the good call.
Jorge said, "Really entertaining watch. I really appreciated how on point it felt to the first, especially after 30 years. Tim managed that so well. He didn't manage all these random plot lines though. Felt like side quests with no real impact on the main storyline." Yeah, I mean, that's like the running theme that I'm getting from most of the reviews here. And it sounds like you're not necessarily in disagreement, but
no,
on the lines of like, but you can still enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to you after the film, or after I saw it, I mean, that there are so many like unresolved storylines that I sincerely thought there'd be at least one mid or end credit scene that, tied something. And I don't want to give examples because they're spoilery, but like, I can think of like at least 6 things they could have done as like an end credit stinger just to at least resolve something. Like it's just like there are like 500 things that just kind of like get thrown out there, and like I'm always like, oh, I wonder where this is gonna go. And either gets resolved like that, like snap the fingers quick, or it doesn't get resolved at all. And it's just like, all right, well, I don't know what happened to those characters, but I hope they're doing well. Maybe they're in the 3rd movie. I don't know.
Yeah. Tony said, "Amazing visuals does not make an amazing movie. I thought this looked spectacular, but there was just way too much going on here. There were about too many plots for me to find any of them fully enjoyable, and it never really felt like there was a reason anything was happening. They really wanted the shrunken head guys to be the Beetlejuice universe's minions, didn't they? Willem Dafoe and Catherine O'Hara were absolutely on point, though. Yeah, so this is the review that I kind of click with the most, but I will say, the Shrunken Heads thing, I think we both agree. Yeah, they should have done more with that.
I thought that was fun.
In the real world, and
I love Bob.
Bob is pretty cool.
Bob is also a name of one of the minions, but I do think he is a very lovely character, and I don't think he deserved his fate.
Yeah, well, we don't want to give anything away, so we won't say what his fate ultimately was. All right, well, Will Ashton, should we play the Rotten Tomatoes game?
Sure, I'm very curious what this one's going to be. I haven't been spoiled yet.
Oh, perfect. Well, we have 306 reviews counted. We have the tomato meter and the popcorn meter. So we have to start calling the audience score now. Okay. But yeah, for the tomato meter, what do you think the critics, where do you think they landed on the tomatoes?
So I think this is generally positive. It seems like most people are in my camp. Like I know there are people that don't really like the film. They're closer to where you are, but I feel like most people like the film, but don't love it, which for Rotten Tomatoes doesn't make that much of a difference as far as the rating is concerned. But I do think that means that like 3/4 of critics probably enjoyed this thing. So I'm going to say this is an 81%.
Well, oh, don't worry. It's still me, John.
Oh, yeah. Boy.
Well, you're wrong. It's 100%.
Oh, wow. Okay.
% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Excuse me. Sorry, Will. I was munching on some popcorn and that guy from before took the mic away from me. But no, yeah, this movie did not get 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Sorry about that. It actually got 77%.
All right. So I was pretty close.
Yeah, not too. I mean, you were very, very far away, but not too far. What about the popcorn meter? I have some popcorn right here. What do you think the score is for that? We have 10,000 plus verified ratings. So remember, this is audiences' reactions.
I think audiences are going to be more in line with this than critics. I think they're going to be, with it for the most part. I think it has a lot of the touchstones of the original movie. It is a busy, overworked film, but, I think audiences are kind of commissioned at this point to expect a lot from movies like this. So I'm going to say it has an 87% on the audience score.
Not even close. Audiences are dumb, but I'm smart, and it's 0%. 0% for Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. The coolest movie there is.
Sorry, Will. You jumped in again, but it's not, in fact, 0%. It is 81%.
Oh, so I got flip-flopped, kind of. A little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah.
You've done that before. Okay, so let's do the cinema score. The letter grade. What do you think? From A+ to F, what do you think the cinema score is for this one?
I think it is a firm B for Beetlejuice.
I like that thinking. I do. But you know what? The first film got a B. This one got a B+. You know why?
Cool.
Because it's B, Beetlejuice plus Beetlejuice.
Well, that would make it B square, right?
No.
Okay. I mean, there's only one Beetlejuice in the movie, right?
Yeah, but it's Beetlejuice.
Right.
And we both know the third one is going to be called Beetlejuice Tokyo Drift.
Oh, if it's Tokyo Drift, I'm going to have so much fun.
Yeah, we're going to go to Japan, guys.
No, get out of here.
Oh, man. Surely nothing problematic will happen from there.
All right, on letterboxd.com, we have 312,000 logs on the site. That's quite a lot. What do you think the average rating is from 0 to 5?
I think it is 3.5.
3.4.
Okay.
Closest yet. So yeah, 3.4. So really, like, it is just firmly in that B/B+ territory from the Rotten Tomatoes, popcorn meter, cinema score, like all of it is kind of in that zone. So you can see, Wash, and why I'm just sort of like, Clearly I'm the problem because people like this movie, but I don't see the magic. I don't see what's got people coming back for seconds. I don't know.
I mean, I would probably say I'm closer to like B and B- than B or B+, but I still think it's just a fun time at the movies. I don't know why you're being a bit of a sourpuss, but maybe as we get closer to October, you'll be more in the Halloween spirit and more receptive to Beetlejuice.
Maybe so. I mean, I am looking forward to Halloween this year, and I'm looking forward to whatever else we're going to be talking about on the feeds soon. So yeah, we have more movies coming along. You saw Transformers 1.
I did.
On Saturday.
I did.
And I'm very, very much looking forward to hearing your thoughts on that. It's getting really good reviews, not to give away the Rotten Tomatoes game early here.
Yeah,
But,
I'm going.
I just watched Wild Robot.
Oh,
That was
yeah.
a good time.
I heard that was a good movie.
It's good. And yeah, I genuinely, I walked out of it, and you'll hear it in my instant take. But you know what? I could actually see it winning Best Animated Feature this year at the Oscars, beating out Inside Out 2. I think it has a very good shot.
I feel like this year, I don't know, I've been kind of easing my way into the Oscar prediction stuff, and it looks like this year's animated category, if it plays out the way I'm thinking it's going to play out, might be surprisingly kind of robust. Considering the last few years, it hasn't been. So I'm hoping this is a good year for animation. We'll see.
Well, I'm hoping it's a good year for Cinemaholics. We'll be back soon. And thanks so much for listening. And don't forget, you can hang out with us in our Discord, which is in the show notes. You can also email us, cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. And check out all of our stuff on cinemaholic.com as usual. Will Ashton, what are you watching this week? Like, what's your next your thing? Because I don't know if we've slated what our next big review is going to be. I think we talked about Speak No Evil, but we might vote for that.
I am trying to find somebody to do a Speak No Evil episode, because John teased the idea, and then when I actually finally got on board, you're like, nah, JK, I'm not going to do that. So I'm trying to find somebody who would be open to it.
Obviously, everybody knows.
But for me, I only really want to do it if I can talk to somebody who hasn't seen the Danish one. I don't know if you've ever got around to seeing that one or not.
The one?
No, the Danish one.
The Danish Woman.
No, the Danish version of Speak No Evil that came out in 2022.
That makes more sense. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I know you really wanted to watch Am I Racist? And obviously I told you maybe we could do it, just not recording that conversation. You know.
Did you see that Jeremy Johns loved that movie?
Oh God. Oh, thanks for dropping that bomb on me.
Sure.
I do at some point will need to talk to you about The Substance. ASAP.
That is coming out this weekend, I believe.
Please prioritize it, because that is a movie that I absolutely have to talk about with you for my own benefit, selfishly.
Sure. We are playing at the theater where I work, so I should hopefully have a chance to see it relatively soon.
There you go.
But the one I am really excited to talk to you about and excited to see is Megapolis, which I believe is coming out next week. Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to be seeing that, I believe, tomorrow, or I forget when. But
all right. I know you're going to hate it, so I'll see what you think about it soon.
I will. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you on the next show from the Internet California. I am Johnny Groening.
And for the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
See you next time.
Where's Beetlejuice?
Get out of here, losers.